about, man. I can see it with the eyes of the heart. I'm going to say one more thing and sit down. Visit the divine optometrist, and not only do you see your hope, not only do you see your inheritance, look what else he says. You see the power of God operating in your life. He says in verse 19, same prayer, that the eyes of your heart might be enlightened, that you'll see what is the exceeding greatness of his power toward us who believe. Even though you cannot see it with your physical eyes, he says it is there. Now let me use another example of that on a lower, lesser, lighter level. Right now on the border between France and Switzerland, the biggest experiment in the history of physics is prepared to take place next fall. It's cost billions of dollars to get it ready. They have dug a tunnel 17 miles across, all the way around, so they can shoot atomic particles at speeds never before reached. And when they have a collision, they expect to see things that have never been seen before. Nuclear physicists have said for decades that there's one particle they know is there, but it's never been seen. It was named for the physicist who first predicted it, a man named Higgs, so they call it the Higgs particle. And they say if it is discovered, it is the power that holds everything together. It's even been called the God particle. And this next fall, they're going to flip a switch and they're going to shoot protons at one another, and they're going to hit one another with such power, they think for the first time they will see this power that's never been seen. Well, let me say this. If that's true on a lower, lesser, lighter, earthly level, I want you to know on a higher, holier, heavenly level, there's a power that you can't see with your physical eye. That's why Paul, right here in this passage, turns the dictionary of the Greek New Testament upside down, and he uses every word in the language that was available for power. He had 4 words. First of all, he says it's dunamis. That means power in reserve. God has so much power that he has a reservoir that can't even be tapped. Then he uses the word energos. That's the word energy. It means active power. Then he uses the word kratos. That means power overcoming anything that resists it. And then he says, is there any word left? And he said, yes, iskos. That means vital power, the power of vitality. And he puts all those words together, emptying the dictionary. And then he says, that's not enough. He says, the greatness of the reservoir of his energetic resistant power. And then he said, that's not enough. So he says, the exceeding greatness of his power. He piles word on top of word on top of word. And he says, if the eyes of your heart are opened, you can see the power of God. Now, I want you to understand something. God's power is not a noisy power. No. This week they launched another space shuttle, and then big noise. When humans demonstrate power, it's noisy. We shoot a gun, drop a bomb. God doesn't have to make any noise with his power. Let me tell you how God's power is. This morning, right here in Houston, the gentle rays of the sun came through the shears in a baby's nursery and fell on that baby's closed eyes, and it was so quiet it didn't even wake up the baby. And yet, at the same time, that sun was shining down on the Gulf and pulling up millions of tons of water and creating the variances of pressure and temperature that blow those clouds over the land and empty it out. And it didn't even wake up a baby. That's God's power. That same sun didn't even wake up the baby. this morning hit everything green in Houston. Green blades of grass, green leaves on the trees. I doubt anybody in this church house, while drinking morning coffee, looked across the table and said, "You know what, baby? The sun is hitting the chlorophyll." And yet, that sun hitting everything green is what creates the thin blanket of atmosphere that makes life possible. And it's so quiet, you don't even hear it. Do you understand what I'm trying to say this morning? God's power is always there, but only the eyes of the heart can see his power. Now, let's not be silly about God's power. Sometimes people act silly about it. I mean, this whole thing, God, a lot of different things happen, but God's power is not exhibited in its real power when somebody points at somebody and they just fall over. Let me tell you where God's quiet power is exhibited. All of that energy can be brought to bear on your impatience and turn it into patience. All of that power can come to the habit, and all God's children got a habit. It can come to your habit that manacles you and fetters you, and God's power can break that habit. God's power can come to what you're afraid of. We all got phobias of some kind. It can come to your phobia that haunts you before you go to sleep at night and that greets you with a leer when you wake up in the morning. God's power can break the bond of that fear and set you free. But you can't see that with your eyes. You only see it with the eyes of your heart. When they're illumined, God's power. Let me say this, and I'm going to sit down. It's what happened 1 week ago today in this city that is exactly to the point of what I'm saying. Friend of your pastor and a friend of mine, Reverend Dr. Samuel Gilbert II, pastor at the Mount Sinai Baptist Church in the Heights section of the city, some months ago was the object of an errant golf ball that hit his eye and put his vision out. One doctor received emergency room, another ophthalmologist had to give the diagnosis, another surgeon had to remove the injured ocular, fitted with a prosthesis. 3 doctors. Well, a miracle happened last Sunday. I've never heard of this in my life. All 3 of those doctors showed up at the Mount Sinai Church to hear him preach his first sermon since that accident. One of them was a Catholic, one of them was a Jew, and one of them was something else. And do you know what the Catholic doctor said after the service? He said, because of the testimony I've seen in you, my own spiritual life has been renewed. You see, a preacher lost his physical eye, but a doctor got the eyes of his heart enlightened. That's what you can do when God opens the eyes of the heart.